probably, I don't know, 15, 20% over the last 6 years. Also, you've got the federal dollars coming in that have increased significantly over the last few years. The problem is, you know, this is my third director, and just holding people accountable. And then underneath, and I've met with Allie, and I think she would tell you also that the bureaucracy underneath her, when she finally got her people in place and had the right questions asked, nobody is asking questions with this spending with Grand Lake, for example, with sending them $148 million, or this group. What are the outcomes? What are the discretionary bonuses that have just been given out and given to these organizations without any outcome-based or any questions asked? So, you know, it's again, these are simple principles, holding people accountable for outcomes, and you know, maybe the question is, why don't we give more money to the community group that's charging the state $2,600 per patient versus $6,700? Well, they don't pay their CEO $1.3 million is one thing. So, listen, as the governor of Oklahoma, I'm going to continue to dig on these things. I'm going to continue to ask the questions. The problem is with the bureaucracy is they think they always hold the higher ground. Well, sure, let's spend more money on this. Let's spend more money on this. Let's spend more money on this. We need more of everything, right? But it's at the end of the day, you have to make tough choices. And it's the same thing that our federal government's going through. I'm not saying that all these programs and the humanitarian efforts around the world aren't important, but can we really keep borrowing $2 trillion to fund all these things? So those are the questions we're asking ourselves as Oklahomans is, how much should we be spending as a state, right? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hold people accountable, and we're going to make sure those dollars are used efficiently. And besides asking questions and putting people on notice that we're looking at them, and then watching them squirm and call the media and try to say people are dying. I mean, that's their first move that they go to, because they don't want you to move their $1.3 million salary.
Good afternoon, Governor. So you've said a lot about third parties, contractors getting money. Our State Department of Education has had $600,000 in bonuses that Ryan Walters approved last year, including one of his policy advisors. What would you say to that? And also, secondarily, on the state level, one of your cabinet members, Stephen Harp, is one of the highest paid agency directors among corrections people in the country. So outside of like third-party people getting paid, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say, well, on the first part of it, listen, I think those bonuses, I'm not in his position. I don't run that agency, but it sounds expensive to pay a bonus to someone that lives out of state to advise you on whatever he's advising him on, or whatever they're doing. Yeah, I don't pay $600,000 bonuses. I didn't know I was allowed to in the governor's office. And just like I said before, the governor should be appointing all those statewide elected officials. It would be run more like some of the other states. And there's too many politics involved, because people are now running for their next elected office out of their current position. So can't do anything about the bonuses. As far as the salary to Harp, he's not on my cabinet, but he runs the Department of Corrections. And I don't know what it is compared to other ones, but I think his salary is somewhere around $250,000. Is that right? It's a lot of money. It's not $1.3 million, but he handles a $1 billion budget or more. He's done a really good job, and manages 2,000 employees. And I think it's equivalent. He made more in the private sector, and so that is what it is. And if the legislature wants to cap all salaries in state government at what the governor's is, or move the governor up, that'd be fine too. But just kidding about that. But those are there. He's within a bracket, I think, and that's always a hard deal. But whenever you hire people, you really usually, or the way I've done it in the past, is I look at what their salaries were before, where they're coming from. We've got medical doctors that can make more in the private sector. When we have them running Department of Health, I've paid them historically more money than another agency director, maybe with a bachelor's degree. But also, when you think about running these big state agencies, they are running $1 billion budgets. They're running 2,000 employees. you need people with business acumen to run them. These are big CEO roles, and that's not dissimilar to, heck, it's on the lower list of the nonprofits here that I'm reading off, so. Yes, sir.
This past week, has been a talker with the state forester who's been removed and everything. So I wanted to ask you, you've obviously talked about this and the ineffectiveness, but do you have receipts of exactly what the state forester didn't do? I know you've personally lost some property with that. So what is going forward also with the forestry department?
Yeah, the forestry department, first off, that's 33% of Department of Ag's budget, which I think most people will find shocking. So it's about $75 million a year that we spend on forestry people, or really they're firefighters, I think is what they would say. They're forest firefighters in the state of Oklahoma. And really, I'm not blaming anybody for those fires. What I'm questioning and what I'm frustrated with, like most Oklahomans, is this was a time to save property and save lives. And if we didn't have all of our resources there on those fires, that's frustrating. And then furthermore, 2 days later, when the humidity went up and the winds were down and we had a chance to get those put out on Saturday and Sunday, we should have had all resources there. Furthermore, the fact that we can't get answers about where their assets were around the state is further proof that this is a deep-seated bureaucracy that are trying to protect their actions. We still haven't been able to figure out where they were during that thing. So there were in Stillwater, Oklahoma, asking for resources, and I think if all the resources were spent, we get it. There was just a lot of fires going on, but that wasn't the case. And if there were assets that were not deployed during that event, myself as governor, I've got to hold people accountable for that. So we're digging into that. We will get you that information as soon as we find it. But there's going to be, here's the deal. Why do I even have a Department of Forestry? Let's just get rid of the whole thing. That'd save $75 million for the taxpayers, or let's take $50 million of that and let's give it to our local firefighters. Let's give it to our volunteer fire departments, the folks throughout the state that are actually already there doing this, because the bureaucracy in Oklahoma City let our local folks down. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it, and I'm not going to not keep asking those questions. I've also put Secretary Everest and Secretary Arthur, and I'm going to have them, kind of convene a task force to do a post-mortem on this, to find this out, to report back on what we can do better next time when there is an event like that. We really haven't looked at them yet. We're going to wait and see what the legislature does on it. I'm sure my team has, but I've been, I haven't personally looked at those yet.
Governor, over here on your, sorry, I got the mic. On your executive order related to religious freedoms in schools, yesterday the Attorney General put out a press release saying that essentially you're going to have to be prepared to allow the state to fund religious schools pushing things like radical Islam, Satanism, Scientology, religions that aren't Christian faiths. And I wonder if you're looking at it that way, and what you make of that challenge that the Attorney General is pointing out.
Well, first off, I find it offensive to people of the Muslim faith that he's calling it radical. Not all Muslims are radical, and so I find that offensive. Just that's the point of religious liberties. What you may not think is a good religion. When are you going to say that you're frustrated with my religion? You don't like the way my church worships, right? So that's the whole thing. Listen, religious liberties are the keys to all other liberties, right? Our founding fathers knew that. My executive order basically is lined up with the United States Supreme Court. There's been major decisions recently that said if you're going to have a public benefit, you cannot discriminate based on someone's religion. So that's all my executive order said was, hey, Historical Preservation Society, if you're going to have a grant program to preserve a historical building and you're going to prove something, and some other Catholic charities qualifies for everything, you can't exclude them, or you can't exclude them based on their faith. That's all this says. Arts Council, So all of our different state agencies need to go back and make sure they're not excluding people based on faith alone, right? That's all that says. I think most Oklahomans agree with me. The St. Isidore charter school, really excited for the Supreme Court. I mean, you don't know how big that is, guys. The Supreme Court never hears cases. Like probably 1% they'll accept cert on a case. Everybody wants their case to go to the Supreme Court. And for the Supreme Court to grab the St. Isidore case in Oklahoma, we think it's going to be a historic, religious freedom case in the country because, here's the deal. If a parent, you don't have to send your kid to St. Isidore's Catholic charter school, okay? If you're not a Catholic, I'd probably say don't do it unless you just want to send them there because it's going to be the best outcomes and you're going to have the best ACT scores and your kids are going to have the best opportunities later on, then yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of kids that want to go to that school. But you don't have to go is my point. You can go to any school you want, and if you want to set up a Hebrew school, a Jewish school, and if there's enough families that want to set that up, then that's okay. That's exactly what religious freedoms are about. We can start any church we want in America and in Oklahoma, and we should be able to start any school that we want in Oklahoma and in America. And I think the Supreme Court agrees with that. Most Oklahomans agree with it. And again, the Attorney General is trying to protect his position. He's trying to spin people in a circle on this and try to fearmonger about radical, I think, what did you say? He calls it radical Islam. I find that offensive. I've got great Pakistani friends. I'm actually speaking this weekend at the Pakistani Doctors Association. They're coming into Oklahoma with thousands and thousands of Pakistani doctors from around the country. They're predominantly Muslim and great, great folks. And who am I to say that that's bad if they want to practice their religion or they want to educate their kids that way? We shouldn't stand in the way. The government shouldn't stand in the way. Should the government pay for it? Should the money fall to the student? 100%. Yeah, and let me give you another example. We already have, if we have a public benefit, for example, Medicaid, we've talked about that a little bit. There's $8 billion spent in Medicaid in the state of Oklahoma. About 1 million people are on Medicaid. Aged, blind, pregnant women, children, the working poor, people under 138% of the poverty line, they have a Medicaid, Sooner Care, all right? We don't restrict them to only go to a government hospital or a government doctor. Guess what? They can go to a Pakistani doctor. They can go to St. John's in Tulsa, which is a Catholic hospital. They can go to St. Francis. Anybody that accepts Medicaid, that's public dollars going to a private Catholic hospital, okay? There's no difference. Same thing with food stamps. We don't require, what state spends $2 billion a year on food stamps, right? Food insecurity people. And we don't require you to go to just your local government grocery store, right? They can go to any grocery store you want. And as a Christian, I can have a grocery store and I can accept food stamps, right? So there's no difference. So this argument that we're using state dollars, no. We're educating our kids and we're putting parents in charge of education. It's a big, big difference than people trying to spin this, calling it radical Muslim or whatever he said. Yes, sir.
Last question.
Yes, sir. Regarding SB 7430 that died, there's been 30 states across the nation that put forth legislation banning transgender hair color injections of varying movement and everyone. Our activity junior is closely working with Gain Waiting and right now doing engineering watch and interviewing several people within the Senate staff. There was a majority of conservatives going into kill this bill in subcommittee. And right now you have two Oklahoma residents cooperating with Oklahoma City FBI regarding the military use under Title 50 that permits them to spray poison in our skies. Are you having any plans to declare an emergency session to push this legislation through that the body itself and the member states is important, it's national security and also our health, which is also our health?
No.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Contrails, man.